Here we are right at the end of week one of spring football for the West Virginia Mountaineers. We've heard from not only Neil Brown, which I touched on in a previous video, but we've now heard from both Chad Scott and Jordan Leslie, the offensive and defensive coordinators, as well as a few players. So what I want to talk about in this video is how different will West Virginia look in 2023 versus 2022. And in doing that, I will recap and give my thoughts on the assistant coaches' press conferences and what they had to say. So pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and let's talk about it. What is up, college sports fans, fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Coos, and welcome into another edition of Coos' Corner. Pull up that chair and let me serve you up this shot of top shelf college football content. On tap in today's episode, we are going to talk about West Virginia spring football, some of the changes that are taking place. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball with Chad Scott. But real quick, before we do, I want to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to this channel here, please do so. If you like West Virginia Mountaineer football, Big 12 football, and covering conference realignment, you need to subscribe here. Please like the video if you don't mind. Please share it with your friends and drop a comment below and let me know what you think about the comments made by Jordan Leslie and Chad Scott in this week's press conference. So let's dig in. First, let's look at Chad Scott. And I'm going to kind of just go position by position. Here's the way I'm going to organize this for you. But we're talking about the quarterback position. He really didn't talk about quarterback a whole lot and didn't get a lot of questions about the quarterback because I think most of those questions went to Coach Brown earlier in the week. But the comments Scott made about the quarterback position, he obviously mentioned having a running quarterback for the first time and how that will really open up the running game and how much it helps the running game. He talked about how they will be able to use basically the same play calls for both quarterbacks. Whereas in the past, if they brought Garrett Green in the game, Neil Brown had a completely separate play sheet. If you remember, there was even one game, Neil Brown had the wrong play sheet out for Garrett, or I think it was for Garrett, and it ended up causing them to have to burn a timeout, which ended up hurting them later in the game because they needed that timeout because they weren't going to get the play in time. So they had to call a timeout. So not having to manage two play sheets is going to be critical. It's going to be very important, not only for time management, clock management, but it'll just be easier to prep and call games as a whole as an offensive staff. And I also think it'll be good for the quarterbacks as well. And he talked about how, they may not need to run it. They may not call a lot of specific running plays for quarterbacks because they won't really have to. They will be able to fit it in with their RPO scheme and their RPO game. And the quarterbacks will run the ball enough during the course of the game just through, pulling it. But because we all know with RPO, the way it works is the quarterback has the option of handing it to the running back, pulling it and running it himself, or throwing the ball based on what the defense does. And if he goes to hand it to that running back and he sees the defensive end crashing down, the quarterback pulls it and can run. And there will be enough of that probably that they won't need to call a whole lot of design run plays for the quarterbacks. I'm not saying they won't at all, but they won't have to do it a lot. Where last year they did. When they brought Garrett Green in, they called a lot of run plays for Garrett. Now, when talking about the running backs, which this is where they spent most of the time because obviously Chad Scott is also the running back coach along with the offensive coordinator, and he's been coaching these running backs now for several years. But he did confirm, just like Neil has talked about, they will have two running backs on the field at the same time. Some during this year, there will be times they might have guys, two running backs, both lined up in the backfield together. But most of the time, based on what Chad Scott was saying, they will have one running back in the backfield and the other one will be lined up in the slot. And he really talked about how C.J. Donaldson's skill set can be utilized here. It's a great opportunity to use C.J. and his versatility and his experience as a pass catcher because if you remember, C.J. played mostly tight end. Actually, I think he played mostly receiver in high school. So he can catch the football. He's a good pass catcher. And they actually recruited him as a tight end to West Virginia, if you remember. But they moved him to running back last year out of necessity, and he ended up being excellent at it. So they're keeping him there, obviously. But having him on this team gives him so many options. They can split him out as a tight end, as an H-back. They can put him as a slot receiver. So many different things they can do. Also asked about running backs in the blocking game once again. C.J. Donaldson's name pops up. Chad Scott said normally you are concerned about running backs and blocking when you have two of them in the game, but he talked about how CJ's blocking is so good, especially on the outside, because of his experience playing wide receiver. So when they get out in a run, if you got two backs in the game, say you've got CJ and just Jalen Anderson in the game together, if you hand the ball to Jalen, you've got CJ as a lead blocker out in front, a guy who's blocked before a lot on the outside against corners and linebackers, you've got you have an advantage there already. It's not like you're having to teach a guy to block for the first time. CJ knows how to do it. He's done it. And he also talked about just in general how these guys they have such a good relationship. They love blocking for each other, and it really helps that they have great chemistry together. Also, he talked about how the running backs will be more involved in the pass game. Obviously, I think we kind of assumed that because of the style they're going to play, and because of the fact that most of their wide receiver production left from last year's team, so they're going to have to rely more on the running backs, which right now, along with that offensive line, it could be the strength of this football team. There's a major focus on taking care of the football. Chad Scott talked about that. They're doing a lot of drills and a lot of work to help take care of the football, not put the ball on the ground. Back to talking about CJ, he did say CJ is limited at practice, but he's not out. He is practicing, but they're not doing a lot of full contact with him because of the injury he suffered and because he's, they don't want to get him hurt again. He's probably not fully recovered from the injury, and they don't want to get him any major contact. And one of the interesting takeaways when it comes to running back is they asked about the fullback position. And right now they've got the fullbacks and the tight ends both in the same room together. But Coach Scott did say there are two guys on this team who could fill a true fullback role, and they are trying to find a way to utilize those guys. And they are Luke Hamilton and Colin McBee. He said both of those guys have fullback bodies. Luke Hamilton is the transfer in. I think he came from Towson. He's a true fullback, and he can play the fullback position. Colin McBee, Coach Scott said he had a great offseason, so his body's now more ready to play a bigger role. So maybe he could step up and be a fullback, and maybe at times you could have a fullback and a tailback in the game at the same time. And also those fullbacks could line up in a tight end spot or an H-back spot as well, and maybe give you another option to catch the ball out of the backfield. So there's so many different things this team can do this year with the versatility they have at the running back position, the different body types they have at that position. I'm really excited to see what they're able to do. And talking about wide receiver, didn't say a whole lot. He did talk about Devin Carter, how well he's looked on third down situations, said he's made some really big-time catches. And keep in mind, when they've done these pressers, I think they'd only had 1, maybe 2 days of practice. So, the sample size was really small, but apparently Devin Carter has looked really good the first couple of days of practice. And then when asked about Rodney Gallagher, who we all know Rodney Gallagher's not on campus yet, but he's finishing out his high school career, so he has not arrived yet. But they asked Coach Scott if he had any plans, if they already had a plan for Rodney Gallagher and how they're going to use him. He said, absolutely. And his eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, man. You can tell they're very excited to get this guy on campus, and they're very excited to find a way to utilize him in the offense. And, man, I'm telling you, with Rodney Gallagher and his experience playing quarterback in high school, I could see them going with Wildcat formations, having two, maybe him on the field at the same time with Nico or Garrett. I mean, there's so many different things they could do with Rodney Gallagher. I mean, it's really exciting to think about, to be honest. And then Chad Scott talked a little bit about, they asked him about being OC versus being strictly the running backs coach. And a couple of different things stood out. Number one, he talked about how, as a running backs coach, he's always on the sidelines with the guys. And Chad Scott is a coach that has a lot of energy on the sidelines. When a running back makes a big run, he's running along beside him down the field. I mean, he loves to jump up and chest bump him after big plays. He likes to dab him up, things like that. He's just a big energy guy. And sometimes, and matter of fact, most of the time, offensive coordinators are sitting up top in the booth. Chad Scott has made it clear, at least in his presser, he does not want to do that if he can help it. He would rather stay on the sidelines with his guys because not only does he relate well with the running backs, he relates to all the guys on the team, and he feels like that's his strength. He's relating to all the guys, and that will be missed if he's not on the sideline. So maybe there's a way they can put other guys up top. Maybe you can put Sean Reagan, maybe Blaine Stewart, some other guys up in the box, and have that way you can keep Coach Scott down on the sidelines. Let them be there. Let them be his eyes up in the box, up in the booth. And then even in Tony Mathis's press conference, he did just a day ago. I'm recording this video on Friday, March 24th. Yesterday they did the player interviews, and they talked to Tony Mathis, and he was even joking about how he didn't realize Chad Scott could jump so high when they do chest bumps. So, they're going to miss his energy on the sidelines if he has to go up into the booth. If you want to support my channel here financially, there's a couple different ways you can do that, actually several. Check out the links in my description box to my merch store. You can also check out links to Fanatics to do your online shopping there. You can join my channel by hitting the join button right below, become a member. Shout out to Timbo, who's another Mountaineer Maniac member of my channel. Also, shout out to Cody Cutright, who's a channel member as well, Outlaw of College Football. Shout out to him. HBAR Farkle, shout out to you, my man. I appreciate your support. I'll try to get the rest of you next time, but random shout outs is part of being a channel member along with many other perks. Also, if you want to make a one-time donation, there's a heart with a dollar sign in it right below this video. Hit that, make a one-time donation. You can leave a comment along with it as well if you want. Last but not least, if you want to support me free, the 4 things I mentioned in the beginning of the video: like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all those things. Really helps out that YouTube algorithm, helps my channel grow, helps get my video out to more people. With that being said, I really appreciate your support, and thanks for tuning in. Until the next time, Q Country Roads.